Hi, welcome to our latest Take 5 Minutes for Health and Safety video. And in this one, we're just going to have a look at first aid, but the assessment of needs. So what do we need? What first aid do we need in our workplace? What do we take into account? So the health and safety first aid at work regulations, they're from 1981, but their guidance note was updated reasonably recently in 2024. So every employer shall provide equipment and facilities adequate and appropriate for enabling first aid to be rendered to employees. So just what is adequate and appropriate, and what would we take into account? We need to make sure that we've got a number of suitable persons. That could be an appointed person to take charge. It could be your emergency first aiders or your full first aid at work employees who've been done the full first aid qualification, or it could be a mixture of those. In the assessment of need, we may now also include mental health as well as your ordinary traditional first aid for injuries from accidents, etc. So let's just have a quick look at the range of factors that you might take into account when doing your assessment of need. So your number of employees, and that might be variable because you might have a summer season where you've got twice as many employees on site than you do in the winter. So that needs to be considered. You might need to have different numbers of first aiders. The geographical spread of employees, are they all in one area, in one factory, on one area, or have you got multiple factories on one site, multiple buildings, that type of thing? Have you got inexperienced or at-risk employees? So therefore, they might be more likely to have an accident. So as such, we might need to have additional first aiders. What's the tasks and activities that you do? Is it low risk work like an office? Is it medium risk like production, or high risk sort of construction type work? Because obviously the higher the risk of the work, the higher, more likely people are to get injured and need first aid. But even within construction, there's a range of different construction activities, some more high risk than others. On that note, the hazards, the things with the potential to cause harm, is it wet floors, uneven flooring? Is it people that are working at height? So uneven flooring at height is a higher risk. So we want to know the hazards, but also what are the risks? Is it the risk of an entrapment injury? Is it a risk of a burn? Is it the risk of a chemical, come into contact with a chemical or inhaling a toxic gas? So hazards and risks. And that might be different in the different areas of your site or business. The types of injuries or ill health which might actually are likely to occur. And again, that could be varying depending on what you're doing, time of year, different types of activities. The accident and incident history of your site. Yeah, if the site is well run and there's lower numbers of accidents and incidents, we're less likely to need first aid, but we still need to have a plan B. We still need to have it just in case. But if we've got a good accident history, maybe less first aiders or emergency first aiders might be needed. But equally, if you've got your first aiders, what about when they're not on site? That could be annual leave, or you might do hybrid working now, which causes more of an issue to make sure you've got first aiders on site. What about your shift patterns? If you've got 3 different shifts and they rotate, making sure that we've got first aiders on all of those shifts. Maybe you only work occasionally at weekends. Let's just make sure that they're covered as well. The size of the site, so how easy could a first aider get to somebody or be called? The number of different buildings on site, because some sites are going to have more than one building. Equally, is your work undertaken indoors and outdoors, or both? If it's outdoors, what's the terrain like? If it's uneven, people are more likely maybe to fall or slip or trip or get injured. The location of your workplace, are you in a rural location, or are you in a city centre or in a town? But also the distance from medical services and real life. What's the road system like? How easy would it be for the medical services to actually get to you? And we all hear these days about how long it takes for emergency services to arrive. So we need to be mindful of that and might need more first aid to make sure we've got cover in place. Is the site shared with other employers? And if it is, we can share first aid arrangements and first aiders, but we need to make sure that we cooperate and coordinate our arrangements there. Now, legally, it's first aid at work for employees and workers. We don't legally have to provide first aid for members of the public or visitors who are not employees, but as a part of your moral obligation, you might then, if you do have lots of members of the public visit the site, if you think of a supermarket, I bet most of the first aiders at a supermarket, they're treating members of the public rather than employees. So we can consider that. As I say, mental health and mental health first aiders, it's not the law, but it's just something that as a company you might look at your hazards, your risks, your general risk assessment, other data, and if mental health has been identified as a hazard and a risk, then you might decide to train up people as mental health first aiders as well. Other considerations, the location of your first aid kits. Where are they? Are they accessible in all parts of the business and site? What's the content of that first aid kit? Obviously, we've just got the basics. We don't want any potions or lotions, but also then making sure that it's checked that those contents are actually in there. Last year, we had the Terrorism Protection of Premises Act, which is coming in over the next 2 years. But one of the things that the terrorism at Manchester highlighted was the lack of training that people had in tourniquets and dealing with wounds. So that has now been updated. The guidance from the First Aid at Work Council has been updated. So the first aid training now will include additional training on the treatment of life-threatening bleeding, the use of tourniquets and wound packing, and not just the ones that are in the first aid kit, but actually improvising as well, because the first aider normally needs to improvise with what's available to them, unlike a doctor or a nurse in a medical environment. So is there any other equipment or we need? Is it emergency showers? It could be eye wash stations. It could be obviously our resuscitator, that type of thing, or even blankets or treatment for burns. So as I've mentioned, making sure we check for supplies. There's nothing worse than going to a kit and then finding the materials that you need are missing. Equally, training, obviously first aiders, emergency first aiders need accredited qualifications and courses, 1 day or 3 days. Your appointed person still needs to have training because they're appointed to just take charge. They need to know what to do. So it's training and refresher training as well. So there we are, a quick potted tour around some of the factors that you might take into account when you're doing a first aid assessment of need. It's Jackie from Cambridge Safety. Thanks very much for watching.